I was asked to title this sermon series recently this week, and I got nothing. Yeah, not the song, nothing. But I started thinking about. It's been interesting trying to figure out how to come across these things. And I got somebody sitting there wondering what direction I'm coming at these things, and where are we going? Where are we going with it? And it's important to realize that these 7 letters that we're going to be talking about, like I said, were written to 7 individual churches, but they weren't separated when they were sent. There wasn't a letter to the church of Ephesus that had, like I said, the book of Revelation attached to it, the rest of the vision. There wasn't another letter that just had the letter to Thyatira and the rest of the book of Revelation to it. But all of these 7 letters and the entire book of Revelation were sent together to every church.
So and kind of like a forwarded email.
Yeah, it's kind of good. Like if you love Jesus on Facebook. Don't get me started on that. Anybody like if you love God? If you don't love God, you don't like His. If you don't like God, you don't like God. So that's a rabbit trail. Catch it. There it goes. They're letters. And one thing you're going to realize about each of these letters is, how many of you remember English class or when you were growing up and they taught you how to write a letter? That there are certain formats, certain pieces that go with it. You got your salutation, you got your body, you got the salutations, and for as dear sir or ma'am, especially if you're writing sending for a job or whatever, or to a company, or dear Shelley, hey Shelley, comma. Now I'm asking, we're having, who's Shelley? I don't know. I just made your name up. Pull that out.
Rather than having to set
yeah, edit that out if you heard it. Then you've got the body, which is the body, which is who you or what do you want to say and where you want to go, and just what you're saying and what you're talking about, and yada yada yada. This happened in my life. This happened to things, and then you're like, the ending. I don't remember what that was called, but and your signature. It's like, sincerely, Hair. Or yours truly for love letters, or yours forever and ever. XOO XLOXOXOOOX.
What was the L?
There's an L in there?
Yeah.
LOLXOEG42196. Anyway, so what we're going to see is that these letters also have a structure, and they will have a salutation where Jesus will point out who He is and throw something special about Himself, or something in the vision that He showed John. He's going to highlight that, and there's reason for that for this particular church. And then He's going to show, I have praised you. You guys did good here. And then He's going to say, but I have this against you. And that's going to be in most of the letters. So there are some deviations, there's some differences, but that's going to be the way that we're going to. And we're going to look at what He says to them. So, that being said, let's read His first letter. To open up to the book of Revelation, the Revelation to John, the revelation of Jesus Christ, chapter 2, starting with verse 1. To the angel of the church of Ephesus, write, these are the words of Him who holds the 7 stars in His right hand, who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. I know your works, your toil, your patient endurance. I know that you cannot tolerate evildoers. You have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them to be false. I also know that I also know that you are enduring patiently and bearing up for the sake of my name, and that you have not grown weary. But I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love you had at first. Remember then from what you have fallen. Repent and do the works you did at first. If not, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place, unless you repent. This is to your credit. You hate the works of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. Let anyone who has an ear to hear to what the Spirit is saying, let anyone who has an ear listen. I'm reading a different version than I'm used to, apparently. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. To everyone who conquers, I will give permission to eat from the tree of life that is in the paradise of God. So we have Jesus talking to the Ephesians. Fortunately, there is another book. This is the only letter of the 7 that has another letter that was written to it that we still have in the Bible. The book of Ephesians. So let's look at a couple. So we can always go back and look at where they were coming from, but we'll do that in a second. But let's look at what this is. It says, to the angel of the church in Ephesus. We talked about this last week. We talked about how the angel of the church is the pastor of the church. So originally this was written to the pastor to share with his congregation. It's like, okay, pastor, this is what I'm writing to you about. Wouldn't you hate to get this letter from Jesus? This is good. This is what you're doing. This is what I have against you. But there are certain images. Like I said, Jesus picks to choose to tell this congregation who he is. All right? The first image is we have the image of him. He says, this is from the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. 7 golden lampstands are the churches. And Jesus is in the middle of them. This is where Jesus is saying, I am the one that holds you and protects you in my right hand. I am the one who has you in my right hand, and I walk among you. So this isn't like a message from Joe Bob Jr. from California writing to somebody in Texas, where they don't know what's happening in your life, or they don't know anything about you. They are right. Jesus is saying, I'm right here in the midst of you. This is who this is from. This isn't from somebody who's just going to come up and just look at you from distance. This is somebody who's right in the midst of you, who knows everything that's going on. And he starts off by telling them, I know what you did right. I know your toil. I know your patient endurance. See, remember, this is a time where the church is going through a huge, huge persecution. You know, John's writing this from an island of Patmos where he was sent to jail to live out the rest of his days because he was a Christian, right? Christianity was not accepted at this point in time in the world. They were trying to figure out what to do with him, and they just decided, I don't understand you, I hate you, we're going to destroy you. We're getting this from all different sides. And he says, I know how you patiently endured. I know how you have gone through this. I know that you are going through struggles. I know this. And I'm there with you all the time. I started thinking about, you know, when we write these, I've heard this particular sermon preached, everybody harps on the phrase, you have left your first love. And they always use it differently. Or they always say, you left Jesus, you're not as strong a Christian as you used to be. You've fallen off on the wayside, and you're a backslider. That's the way I've always heard this before. But I've got a different vision of this recently. I have a different vision of, well, maybe not different, but another vision of how this verse is kept. See, if the book of Ephesians, we go back to the book of Ephesians, what Paul wrote to them in the first time. And he wrote to them in chapter 5, verse 11, saying, have nothing to do with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them, or rather expose them. That was their command. That was their goal. That was what they were doing. But I think what happened in Ephesus is they took it a little too far. They started to pursue all sorts of darknesses and tried to expose them in the wrong ways. And they got passionate about it. And they got excited about it. I think of these things. And you guys kind of, you've seen these people in the church today. You've seen them, whether you admit it or not.